How do you think I afford all this? Ad revenue? Cute.
Hello and welcome back to the JK Feather Ranch channel, where today I'm going to get started on what I thought would just be the dash, but basically ended up becoming a full interior overhaul, taking me the better part of a year, mostly on the weekends as time and of course money permitted. With the dash cover out of the way, we can see exactly what we're working with and just how brittle this old plastic is. Let's just pull these A-pillars off. We'll just ignore that broken clip that stayed behind. Let us never speak of this again. With that taken care of, we can finally remove the old broken dash. Some of it is really stuck to this airbag strap, which I'm eventually going to be removing anyways, but I don't know that yet. Don't forget to remove the total of 4 metal clips, or you're going to have a bad time later. The front is only secured with Velcro and some glue residue, and is just going to come out in a million pieces. The foam underneath is still good in my case, so I'm taking care to save it. Finally, there's 2 more clips on the driver's side that need to come out. There will be little bits of plastic everywhere, so let's just deal with that now while we're thinking about it. That's out with the old, and in with the new. New dash pads from GM are still available for about $700, which makes this one from eBay a still overpriced steal at $300. To make things feel a little less plasticky and a little more luxurious, I'll be wrapping it with vinyl before installation. I got this from Joann's, which is now out of business, but you can find it online by searching for marine vinyl. Or, as they say in the automotive world,
RICH Corinthian Leather.
Only the finest contact cement for the finest Corinthian leather. From what I've seen in other videos, this Lando top and trim stuff works well, although it's about $70 a gallon on Amazon where I had to get it since it's banned in California, but that's how you know it works. Excellent for applications such as automotive or marine interiors, including headliners, vinyl trim, dash coverings, door coverings, floor coverings, panel coverings,
shrimp soup, shrimp stew, shrimp salad, shrimp and potatoes, shrimp burger, shrimp sandwich,
and upholstery. Ideal for bonding landau tops constructed of non-penetrable fabric backing and for van conversion. Surfaces to be bonded must be clean, dry, and free of all foreign material.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Well, I guess I'm committed now. No going back from that. Use a standard or hot spray system to apply an even coat to both surfaces, or according to the Amazon reviews, I can use a paintbrush. Allow both coated surfaces to dry for approximately 5 to 10 minutes before bonding. When the surfaces are sufficiently dry for bonding, the adhesive will adhere, but not transfer, to a gloved finger when touched. If adhesive becomes too dry and will not bond, reactivate with a light coat of adhesive. Align both pieces accurately. Contact adhesives bond instantly on contact and cannot be shifted into place. I continued gluing it down in small sections to make sure it contoured to the curves, and I didn't have glue on too much at a time to where it would bunch up if it touched itself or part of the dash I didn't intend it to. I had to be extra careful going around the vent section not to get any glue on the slats going across, since those aren't going to be covered, but as you'll see later, that didn't end up mattering. With half the vinyl secured, I could go ahead and trim off the excess so it's easier to work with. And then it's just a matter of gluing down the rest. Since this was the only real curve, I went over it with a paint roller just to make sure it was fully stuck down. After letting the adhesive set up for a few days, there were a couple spots that separated, but a heat gun made the vinyl soft enough to go back down and stick. It seems the glue is sort of reactivated by heat, so this did end up working, with a few slight imperfections that aren't really noticeable. To take care of the edges, I cut them into pieces so they wouldn't bunch up or tear from stretching too far, and folded them over and secured them with contact cement. I should have spaced my cuts slightly back from the edge so they're not visible from the top, but oh well, this is my first time doing anything like this and I'm still learning. You probably get the idea by now. For these side channels, I went ahead and taped off the outside edge, which won't be visible, before applying contact cement and shoving the vinyl down in there with a trim tool. The last thing to take care of is the defroster vent, so I cut out the general shape with an X-Acto knife, leaving plenty of overlap. While removing any residual glue with my finger, I noticed that the slats themselves were discolored by the alcohol as well, and since they'd be visible, I taped the excess vinyl out of the way and gave them a couple coats of vinyl and plastic paint in a similar color. This just happens to be charcoal from Duplicolor. That's better. I then used a heat gun to form the flaps back into shape and remove any creases. The top was then folded over and secured between each slat. The sides were pulled tight through each individual section, and the bottom was unceremoniously shoved into the scap and cut to make it look like it belongs there. I tried to use a Dremel to remove the excess glue, which ended up being a horrible idea, so let's just pretend that never happened. Finally, I went over my mistake and all the exposed vinyl edges and glue with paint on a Q-tip to hide them as well as I could. Since my original foam was still good and even had some stickiness left, I went ahead and reapplied it to the back of the new dash pad. And it's finally time to install it in the car. Since it can't go back in pieces like it came out, having T-tops makes this part of the process a lot easier. It's held on by Velcro in the back, which should take care of attaching itself, and these clips in the front. The A-pillars reinstall by fitting over the lip on the side, which helps hold the pad in place. Is it perfect? No, but it's a lot better than it was, and that's really all I'm going for with this project. With the pad taken care of, the next thing to deal with was this cracked part of the lower dash. I originally thought the damage was limited to around the vent and airbag cover, which I plan to address by filling with Bondo, texturing, and repainting as I've seen others do. But before I finished that process, I decided it was too far gone, with more brittle spots about to crack, and did something else instead. I'll leave this part in though, in case it helps someone else. I first attempted to remove as much of the old glue as possible by sanding, then wiping the area down with Goo Gone, followed by alcohol to remove the residue. I then cut everything back to soft, undamaged-ish vinyl, and scooped out the foam so I could build the Bondo up thick enough that hopefully it doesn't crack. I tried to carve out some foam under the edges of the vinyl to sort of tie them together and not just butt them up against each other so they'd crack again as soon as the vinyl moves. I then mixed up some Bondo and applied a very rough coat to fill the hole, trying to shove it into the space under the edges to give them support. I actually didn't mix up enough, so I had to go back and make more, but that's better than having too much since it sets up in about 20 minutes whether you use all of it or not and can't be reused. Once the first coat set up, I went ahead and sanded it flat, making sure to remove all the dust so the next coat will adhere properly. It's then just a matter of applying more coats, and more sanding until you have a result that's acceptable to you. I've never done this before, but I have patched drywall and Bondo is just spackle for cars, so how hard can it be? After doing all that, though, I completely changed my mind and decided I was going to go with one of these plastic overlays instead. Aside from being a little cheap looking, it doesn't quite fit right against the A-pillar, causing it to not line up properly with the airbag cover, so a little adjustment is in order. This part clearly got damaged somewhere in the shipping and packaging process, which would have annoyed me far more if I wasn't planning on vinyl wrapping it anyways, which will hide my repair. My original plan was to start with this hard 90-degree bend, since I figured it would be the most difficult part and I could work outwards in both directions from there. But that ended up turning into a frustrating, bunched up mess, so I ripped it all off and started from a much better spot. Using heat allowed me to stretch the vinyl around the curves. And from there, it really is just a matter of heating and stretching until all the bunches are worked out past the edge. The rest will be stretched smooth when I fold it around the back. Now it's time to try and deal with the bend again. With the vinyl glued down right up to the crease on one side, clamped down, and contact cement applied and ready to go, I stretched it over and started the long, painstaking process of working out all the imperfections. The heat does sort of allow me to reposition things once they've been stuck down, which was really the only way I was able to do any of this at all. This corner kept separating no matter what I did, and I already cut off too much material to fold it over the back, so I removed the excess contact cement, filled the gap with JB Weld, and clamped it in place with a paper towel to protect the surface while it set up overnight. With the hardest part done, I just need to fold over a few more pieces, and it's finally done. There's a slight bulge where I had to repair the crack, but it's not horribly noticeable unless you go looking for it. This side here smoothed out almost completely in the end, and overall it came out looking far better than I feel it had any right to. And now it's time for a quick test fit. The issue with the A-pillar is much better, but now I have to figure out something to cover the airbag itself. The dash overlay came with this, which quite frankly is junk. Instead, I'm going to make my own, but first I have to get rid of what's already there. Under the foam layer is this super annoying plastic that's stuck down really well and only comes off in a million pieces. And finally I was left with this really hard glue that made the surface uneven and I could only get off by sanding it. That only took forever, but it's finally nice and smooth. Of course, a smooth surface still needs something to cover it, and for that I traced out the opening onto a sheet of ABS plastic, cut it out with a pair of tin snips, and made sure the edges were nice and smooth. Give it a quick test fit, and that seems to fit nicely. But before I get too far ahead of myself, I need to install the finished dash cover so I can fine-tune things. Removing the gauge bezel makes that easier, especially since I'm planning on wrapping it when everything is said and done. The next thing I'm going to do is paint everything that could possibly show through the gaps a uniform gray color, using the same Duplicolor as before that pretty much perfectly matches my vinyl bits. After giving that about an hour to dry, I went over everything with a damp microfiber towel as a final wipe down. Now, the overlay itself came with a little tube of silicone adhesive, which probably works just fine, but I'm using some Supreme silicone from Home Depot instead, mostly because if it's good enough to hold up some stone trim in my bathroom, it should be more than up to this task. You only want to put a bead around the edges and cutouts like the vents. The rest needs to be free to expand and contract with temperature. Then you just need to make sure you don't touch anything with the silicone that you don't mean to, and hold it in place for 24 hours using any means available.
The next day.
With the overlay now firmly in place, I attached some 1/4-inch self-adhesive foam to the piece I made earlier, and traced out exactly how far past the edge of the plastic it needed to extend to fill the gap. I then covered it with vinyl by first attaching one side, then stretching the other tight, and repeated in the other direction. I still need to match the curve of the dash, but thankfully ABS bends pretty well with heat. The cover still sits about a fingertip below the overlay, which I addressed by adding another 1/4-inch piece of more rigid foam to the back as a spacer. Before installing it on the car, I laid down some strips of leftover foam from when I did my vents over the seams, just to make any gaps look a little better. And it's finally time to glue it in place using the same silicone as before. While that's drying is the perfect time to address the gauge bezel. It has a couple of cracks around the vent, which I definitely didn't cause with anything I did, but it's already been repaired with JB Weld and is about to be hidden with this leather wrap from Redline Goods. It's made specifically for this gauge bezel, but it ships from Poland, and while I bought it last year, your tariffs may vary. I still had some glue to remove from the old dash mat, which, yeah, damaged the surface, but that's all about to be covered up. I'll start from a very obvious point, like this seam here that goes all the way around the front. Although real leather is harder to work with than vinyl, everything else about the process is exactly the same. It just takes a lot more heat to become workable. I did change the way the driver's side vent was mounted to get rid of the rubber trim ring, since the wrap came with its own trim that looked a lot nicer. With the bezel back in place, it definitely looks better than before and doesn't remind me quite as much of the cheap plastic on the Cavalier I used to drive. To round things out, I went ahead and wrapped the glove box lid and underdash kick panel with some 1/16 of an inch foam padding under the vinyl. It's certainly not a luxury car, and it's never going to be, but it's a lot better than the brittle and broken plastic I started with. The color difference is purely because I couldn't find vinyl as dark as the car without being black, which I definitely didn't want, but I don't actually mind the contrast. Of course, now I have to make the rest of the interior match, but that'll be a project for another video. Subscribe.